The snickers rippled through the congregation like dry leaves in a November wind, sharp and unrelenting, as Ellie shuffled into the back pew of Grace Evangelical Church. Her threadbare sneakers, once white, now a ghostly gray, squeaking against the polished oak floor. "Look at the charity case," hissed Mrs. Hargrove from the front row, her voice a venomous whisper that carried like gospel truth, while her pearl-clutching fingers tightened around her hymnal. In that frozen heartbeat, Reverend Daniel Hayes felt his own heart crack open, a flood of buried shame rising as he gripped the pulpit, knowing all too well what it meant to walk into a holy place feeling like the devil's own mistake. From the shadowed alcove where he adjusted his notes, Daniel's eyes locked on Ellie, not with pity, but with the raw ache of recognition. She was 16, maybe 17, all gangly limbs and defiant chin, her dark hair cropped short in a style that screamed, "I don't care what you think," but the tremble in her hands as she clutched her thrift store Bible betrayed the lie. Daniel had seen that look before, in his own bathroom mirror back in rural Ohio, when he'd stare at the boy who loved baseball cards and stolen glances at the quarterback, wondering if God had made a mistake in the wiring. Now, at 34, leading this flock in Willow Creek, Montana, where the Rockies loomed like judgmental elders and Sundays smelled of coffee and conformity, he was still hiding that boy inside a collar that felt more like a noose. The service droned on, hymns rising like smoke signals of hypocrisy, but Daniel's sermon that morning veered off script the moment he glanced at Ellie again. She sat alone, head bowed, ignoring the sidelong glares from the deacons' wives, who murmured about that phase she's going through with the casual cruelty of women who'd never questioned their own reflections. "Beloved," Daniel began, his voice steady but laced with an edge that silenced the rustle of bulletins. "Today's reading from Matthew speaks of the least among us, the widow's mite, the Samaritan's mercy. But mercy isn't whispered judgment from velvet pews. It's action. It's seeing the invisible and making them seen." He paused, the church air thickening, and before he could second-guess the impulse born of too many sleepless nights, Daniel stepped down from the platform, his loafers clicking like a countdown. The congregation leaned forward, a collective intake of breath, as he strode not to the altar but straight to the back, where Ellie huddled like a sparrow in a storm. Gasps echoed. Mrs. Hargrove's hand flew to her mouth. "Old Mr." Jenkins coughed into his fist, but Daniel didn't stop. He knelt before her, right there in the aisle, the worn carpet biting into his knees, and in one fluid motion, slipped off his own shoes, the leather still warm from his drive-in from the parsonage. "These are yours now," he said softly, placing them in her lap, his fingers brushing hers just long enough to feel the electric jolt of shared vulnerability. Because no child of God walks in shame on Sunday, the church fell into a stunned hush, the only sound the faint creak of pews as bodies shifted in disbelief. And in that moment, Ellie looked up, her eyes, hazel flecked with gold, meeting his with a spark that whispered of secrets neither could yet name. Word of the shoe sermon, as the local paper dubbed it the next day, spread through Willow Creek faster than wildfire in August drygrass. Daniel's phone buzzed non-stop. Congratulations from distant cousins in Seattle, wary texts from the church board, and one anonymous email that read, "Careful, Reverend. Not all sins are as visible as old sneakers." He deleted it, but the chill lingered, curling in his gut like the winter wind off Flathead Lake. Ellie didn't show up the following Sunday, and Daniel found himself driving past the trailer park on the edge of town, the one where rusted pickups squatted like forgotten prayers, until he spotted her silhouette on a sagging porch, kicking at gravel in those two big loafers. He pulled over, heart hammering, and when she saw him, her face twisted, not in fear, but in that teenage mix of defiance and relief. "You trying to get me in more trouble, preacher man?" she called. But there was no bite, just a wry smile that made her look older than her years. Daniel killed the engine and stepped out, the Montana chill nipping at his ankles in socks. Just checking if the shoes fit the girl who inspired half the town to question their dry cleaning bills. She laughed then, a sound like shattering ice, and invited him in for weak coffee in a kitchen that smelled of canned soup and unwashed dreams. Her name was Eleanor Ellie Ramirez, daughter of a Mexican farmhand who'd skipped town when the mill closed, leaving her with a grandmother too frail to work the diner shifts anymore. Ellie had been crashing at the trailer since her abuela's stroke 2 months back, scraping by on food stamps and odd jobs bussing tables at the roadhouse. "They think I'm a freak," she confessed over chipped mugs, her voice dropping as she traced the rim with a chipped nail. "The hair, the clothes, it's not about the shoes. It's 'cause I told Tommy Jenkins I liked his sister more than him. Like that makes me broken." Daniel's throat tightened. He knew that script by heart. At 17, he'd confessed a similar confusion to his youth pastor, only to be handed tracts on deliverance and a one-way ticket to conversion camp. "It doesn't make you broken," he said, the words tasting like forbidden fruit. "It makes you brave. And brave scares the hell out of small towns." They talked until dusk painted the trailer in bruised purples, Ellie unspooling stories of stolen kisses behind the bleachers, the sting of slurs scrawled on her locker, dyke, fag, words that blurred genders like rain on a windshield. Daniel shared fragments of his own. The Ohio boyhood of fishing holes and fireflies, the night he prayed for God to fix his wandering eyes, only to wake up realizing the fix was in loving himself enough to stop asking. By the time he left, promising to check on her abuela at the clinic, something had shifted, a thread pulled taut between them, not romance, but the quiet solidarity of outcasts in a world of straight lines. Back at the parsonage, a creaky Victorian on Elm Street that echoed with solitude, Daniel poured a scotch he pretended was tea and stared at the rainbow flag folded in his sock drawer, a relic from a pride march in Billings he'd attended in secret 3 years back. He'd come to Willow Creek fleeing a scandal in Missoula. Nothing sordid, just a too-close friendship with a barista named Chris that raised eyebrows at presbytery meetings. Here, he was safe. Sermons on grace, potlucks with Jell-O salads, and a congregation that saw him as the golden boy who'd traded city lights for mountain air. But Ellie's arrival had cracked the facade, stirring the embers of a life half-lived. Monday brought the backlash. The church board convened in the fellowship hall, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets, as Deacon Hargrove, Mrs. H's husband, a beefy realtor with a comb over that defied gravity, slammed a printout of the article on the table. "This ain't about shoes, Daniel. It's about spectacle. And now the bloggers are calling us a woke outpost. You know what that does to tithes?" Murmurs rippled. Nods from the elders. A sympathetic glance from Sarah, the youth coordinator who'd baked him cookies last Easter. Daniel met their eyes steadily. "It's about compassion, Tom. The kind Jesus didn't budget for Sundays only." But inside, doubt gnawed. He'd seen churches splinter over less, pastors like him quietly relocated, when the whispers turned to roars. That night, as snow flurried the first tease of winter, Daniel's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Alex Rivera, the new music director who'd started last month. Tall, with olive skin and curls that tumbled like vineyard vines, his guitar case slung over one shoulder like a shield. "Heard about your viral moment," Alex said, his smile crooked, eyes dark as the night sky over the res where he'd grown up in New Mexico. "Thought you could use some chords to go with the chaos." Daniel hesitated, then stepped aside, the warmth of the house and something warmer flooding in. They played late into the hours, Alex's fingers coaxing him into something raw and alive on his acoustic, Daniel harmonizing with a voice he'd only ever used for sermons. Over microwave burritos, Alex shared his own scars. Excommunicated from his family's Pentecostal flock after coming out at 20, now wandering the West on gig money and grit. "I saw you with that girl today at the clinic," Alex said, casual as if discussing the weather. "The way you talked to her, like you got it. Not many straight-laced reverends do." Daniel's laugh caught, brittle. "Who says I'm straight-laced?" The air hummed, charged. But Daniel pulled back, stacking plates with unnecessary force. "It's late. Roads'll ice up." Alex left with a lingering look, and Daniel bolted the door against more than the cold. But sleep evaded him. Dreams tangled with Ellie's hazel eyes and Alex's calloused hands, a tapestry of what-ifs woven on the loom of forbidden longing. The weeks blurred into a fragile rhythm. Daniel visiting Ellie twice weekly, stocking her fridge with groceries from the church pantry, teaching her abuela simple hymns on a borrowed keyboard while Ellie sketched wildflowers in the margins of his Bible. The town buzzed, some with admiration, others with acid tongues, but tithes held steady, buoyed by a viral video of the shoe sermon that racked up shares from as far as Portland's queer coffee shops. Daniel felt the pull of purpose, a rare buoyancy, until the board meeting where Deacon Hargrove dropped the bomb. "We got a complaint," Tom said, sliding a manila folder across the oak table, his jowls quivering with feigned regret. "From a concerned parent. Says you've been inappropriate with the Ramirez girl. Alone in that trailer." Tongues are wagging. "Daniel." The room tilted. Sarah gasped. Old Reverend Ellis cleared his throat. Daniel flipped open the folder. Grainy photos from a dashcam. Him pulling up to the trailer at dusk. Ellie waving from the porch. Innocent. Damning in context. "This is slander," he said, voice low thunder. "Ellie's family. No more." But Hargrove leaned in, breath sour with mince and malice. "It's not just that. Words out about your preferences. That flag in your trash last spring? The Billings trip? Folks talk." Daniel's blood iced. The flag, discarded after a panic spiral. The trip, a cover for that anonymous email's author. Perhaps. Betrayal bloomed hot and sharp. Who? The janitor who'd emptied his bins? A board member tailing him for sport? He stood, chair scraping like a confession. If compassion's a crime here, maybe grace ain't so graceful. He walked out into the sleet-lashed night, the folder clutched like a scarlet letter. Ellie found out via the high school grapevine, cornering him after youth group in the dim-lit gym, where folding chairs smelled of sweat and salvation. "They're saying you pity-fucked me or some shit," she spat, arms crossed, loafers scuffed from kicking lockers. "Like I'm your token queer project." Daniel recoiled, the word queer a mirror to his marrow. "Ellie, it's not. It's bullshit," she cut in, eyes flashing. "I know what it is. They hate us, 'cause we remind them they're cowards." She paced, a caged tiger in hand-me-downs. "My abuela says you're like the saints in her stories, standing up when everyone's kneeling. Don't let them break you." Her hand on his arm was fierce, filial, and Daniel nodded, throat thick, as they sat on the bleachers sharing silence thicker than prayer. Alex became the anchor in the storm. He showed up unannounced with sheet music and stories, turning the parsonage into a sanctuary of strums and stolen glances. One evening, as they rehearsed a new arrangement of Amazing Grace, Alex's twist infusing it with flamenco fire, the power flickered, plunging them into candlelight. "Tell me," Alex murmured, guitar forgotten, "what's the real story with the shoes?" Daniel hesitated, then spilled. The Ohio boy, the camp, the collar as camouflage. I thought ministry was redemption. Turns out it's just another closet. Alex's hand found his in the shadows. Callus's rough poetry. Redemption's not a job, Dan. It's letting someone see the mess. Their lips met then, tentative as a question, deepening into an answer that tasted of salt and starlight. It was chaste, fervent, a kiss of survivors, not sinners, and when they parted, foreheads pressed, Daniel whispered, "This could ruin everything." Alex smiled, fierce. Or fix it, but ruin came swift. The next board meeting, Hargrove escalated, producing witness statements. Reverend Hayes seen embracing the music man at the diner window. Lies, mostly, a hug after a late rehearsal, but seeded with truth. The vote was 7-3. Suspension pending investigation. Whispers of defrocking if he didn't seek counseling. Daniel stormed out, driving blind through the blizzard to Alex's rented cabin on the res outskirts, where pinion smoke curled from the chimney like a beckoning finger. Alex pulled him inside, wrapping him in a wool blanket that smelled of sage and home. "They'll come around," Alex said, but his eyes held doubt. They made tea, talked tactics, resign, fight, rally the youth, the outcasts, until exhaustion claimed them on the couch, bodies entwined in platonic comfort that skirted the edge of more. Dawn broke with a knock. Ellie, soaked and shivering, clutching a duffel. Abuela's worse. They cut her Medicaid cause of the scandal. Said it's divine judgment. Rage and grief warred in Daniel's chest. He loaded them into his truck, bound for the clinic in Kalispell. Alex shotgun with guitar as talisman. The drive was a gauntlet of ice-slick roads and revelations. Ellie confessed her own betrayal. Tommy Jenkins, her on-again tormentor, had outed her to the board for revenge after she rejected him again. He said I'd burn for it, like he knows the fire. Alex shared his, a brother who'd sold his coming-out story to a tabloid for hush money. "Family's the sharpest knife," he said, and Daniel nodded, thinking of his own parents, silent since the Missoula rumors. At the clinic, they waited hours in vinyl chairs, Ellie dozing on Daniel's shoulder, Alex's fingers tracing absent patterns on his knee. When the doctor emerged, stable, but needs home care we can't fund, Daniel made the call that shattered the fragile peace. He resigned via email. Sasanji the presbytery. "Grace demands more than I can give in chains." The reply was swift. Acceptance, with a prayer for his journey. Freedom tasted like ash. Back in Willow Creek, the church parking lot was a battlefield of protest signs. "Keep Christ in Christmas," "Not queers," and counterplacards from the college kids. "Love thy neighbor," period. Daniel, Alex, and Ellie stood at the fringes, a makeshift family forged in frost. That night, under a sky pricked with stars like accusations, Daniel proposed a plan born of desperation and daring. "Let's make it unforgettable," he said to Ellie, echoing the title the town had hung on him. "Your story, my voice. A service they'll never forget." The idea crystallized over diner coffee the next morning, steam rising like holy incense in the formica haze of the Willow Creek Cafe. Ellie sketched it on a napkin. Not a protest, but a reclamation, a midnight vigil outside Grace Church, open to all, with songs, stories, and a bonfire of burdens, where folks could burn the letters of shame they'd carried too long. "Like that Phoenix crap from English class," she said, grinning through chipped teeth. Alex nodded, strumming air guitar. "I'll lead the music. Make it echo off the mountains." Daniel felt the spark ignite, a reckless joy he'd forgotten since youth group campfires. "And I'll preach," he added, the word tasting new, uncollared. "Not as reverend, but as me." Planning consumed them like fever. Ellie rallied the high school misfits, the theater kids with their painted nails, the farm boys nursing quiet crushes, while Alex called contacts from his touring days, queer musicians who'd lend virtual voices via livestream. Daniel wrote the sermon in stolen hours, words pouring like rain after drought. On betrayal's bite, love's quiet revolution, the God who'd wired them wonky on purpose. But doubt shadowed every step. Anonymous calls hissed threats, Sodom's coming, and Hargrove's crew patrolled the streets, eyes like hawks on a mouse. Betrayal struck deepest from within. Sarah, the youth coordinator, cornered Daniel in the parsonage kitchen, her face pale as unleavened bread. "I didn't want to," she whispered, handing over a flash drive of his old voicemails to Chris. "The barista love that never bloomed. Tom made me. Said it'd protect the church." Daniel's world narrowed to the glint of her wedding ring, the same hand that had baked his birthday pie. Protect it from what? Kindness. She fled in tears. But the damage rooted deep, trust. That fragile bloom, withered overnight. He confronted Alex that evening. Drive forgotten, voice cracking over the phone. "Did you know? About the voicemails." Silence stretched. Then Alex's sigh, heavy as lead. "I heard rumors in Missoula. Thought it was past. Not a lie, but omission's cousin. And it stung like salt in a wound. They met at the cabin. Words flying like sparks. Accusations of hiding. Defenses of survival. Until Alex cupped Daniel's face. Thumbs tracing jawline scars. "I stayed 'cause I see you, Dan." The whole messy saint. The kiss that followed was apology and anchor. Bodies pressing with the urgency of almost lost. Hands roaming shirts but halting at belts. A promise, not consummation. "We're in this," Alex murmured against his neck. "No more halves." Ellie sensed the fracture, patching it with her own fire. Abuela stabilized enough for home hospice. Funded by a GoFundMe, Alex viralized with a raw acoustic plea. For the girl in old shoes, and all who walk beside her. Donations poured. $5 from a trucker in Texas. $500 from a Seattle synagogue. Ellie moved into the parsonage's guest room, her sketches papering the walls. Daniel and Alex as knights, her as a winged messenger. "You're my found family," she said one night, braiding Alex's curls while Daniel read psalms aloud. Screw blood. The vigil night arrived under a full moon, silvering the church lawn like a stage set for reckoning. 200 gathered. Locals braving the cold in Carhartts and parkas, out-of-towners with rainbow scarves. Ellie at the bonfire's heart in her original sneakers, polished defiant. Alex opened with "This Little Light," his voice a velvet rumble that drew tears, then handed the mic to Stories, a lesbian rancher on Lost Harvests, a trans teen on Mirror Wars, Daniel saving his for last. He climbed the makeshift podium, a hay bale stack, collarless in flannel and jeans, Alex's hand brushing his for luck. "They mocked the girl in old shoes," he began, voice carrying to the livestream's thousands, because her steps echoed their fears. "I know, because I've worn those shoes. Not poverty's pinch, but the heavier weight of loving who God made you to love. Across lines they draw in sand." Gasps from the fringes, where Hargrove lurked with a recorder. Cheers from the circle. He spoke of Ohio prayers, Missoula heartbreaks, the kiss in candlelight that taught him grace's true shape. "Betrayal taught me this, the knife twists deepest from friends. But love, it mends what blades can't touch." Ellie joined him then, arm linked, her voice steady. "I came for sanctuary, found a fight. But in Reverend Daniel I saw a mirror. Brave enough to kneel." The crowd surged, notes burning in the flames. Slurs, rejections, secrets. and as embers swirled skyward, Daniel pulled Alex on stage, their hands clasped public for the first time. "This man," he said, throat tight, "reminds me daily, we're not fixed. We're found." Chaos erupted at the edges. Hargrove's faction chanting "Repent!", a scuffle breaking ranks, a bottle shattering against the fire pit. Ellie shoved Daniel back as glass flew, a shard grazing her cheek, blood welling like accusation. Alex lunged, tackling the thrower, a deacon's son, wild-eyed while sirens wailed distant. In the melee, Daniel shielded Ellie, heart-pounding revelation. This was the climax, not of ruin, but rebirth, the raw, bloody work of standing scene. Police dispersed the crowd by 2 a.m., arrests minimal, but the vigil trended nationwide. Shoe Sermon 2. Op-eds in The Atlantic praising Montana's queer revival. Daniel, bandaging Ellie's cut in the ER glow, felt the weight lift, replaced by weary wonder. "Worth it?" he asked. She smirked, wincing. "Hell yeah. Now fix my abuela's porch." Dawn painted the Rockies in rose and regret. The parsonage quiet save for Abuela Ramirez's soft snores from the guest room, her rosary beads clicking like a metronome of endurance. Daniel woke tangled in Alex's arms on the living room rug, the vigil's blanket a cocoon against the chill. No regrets shadowed the night. Instead, a fierce clarity. The path forked, and he'd chosen the one less preached. Over breakfast, Ellie's pancakes, lopsided but laced with love, they plotted next steps. "Stay and rebuild," Alex urged, fork waving like a baton. "Or go big podcast, book tour, the works." Ellie voted go. "Willow's too small for your wings, preacher." The town fractured in the aftermath. Petitions circulated, half demanding Daniel's return, half his exile, while the presbytery offered a grace period. Repent publicly, or resign formally. Hargrove's faction splintered, Sarah confessing her role in a tearful email, begging forgiveness Daniel granted via a simple prayers. But the deepest scar was Tommy Jenkins' suicide note, found in his truck by the river. "Sorry I couldn't be brave like you." Ellie read it aloud, voice breaking, and they mourned in silence, the humanistic ache of lives unlived pressing like Montana's endless sky. Climax came unbidden, 2 weeks post-vigil, in the church sanctuary itself. Daniel arrived unannounced, Alex and Ellie flanking like sentinels, to find the board in session, Hargrove at the helm, but the room half empty, faces weary. "I'm not here to fight," Daniel said, standing collarless in the aisle where it began. "I'm here to forgive." He spoke no sermon, just truth. The boy in Ohio who'd learned love from loss, the man who'd knelt for Ellie because her shoes mirrored his hidden ones. "Betrayal broke us open," he said, eyes on Hargrove. "But what's inside? That's the gospel." Tom shifted, deflating like a punctured tire. "We were scared, Dan. Of change. Of hell." A murmur rippled, nods, a sob from Sarah. Ellie stepped forward, sneakers firm on holy ground. "Scared's okay. Hurting ain't." In that charged air, hands extended. Not all clasped, but enough to seed hope. The board voted reinstatement. Conditional, collaborative, a bridge over the chasm. Yet Daniel chose the fork less traveled. With Alex, he launched Echoes of Grace, a podcast from a Billings studio. Stories of the mocked, the kneelers, the lovers who bridged divides. Ellie thrived, scholarship-bound for Seattle's art scene, her sketches now murals on res walls. Abuela passed gently that spring, rosary in hand, whispering gracias, mijo to Daniel as if he'd been kin all along. Summer solstice found them on Flathead Lake's shore, Alex's guitar humming a new hymn, Ellie splashing barefoot, new shoes kicked off, in shallows that glittered like promise. Daniel, hand in Alex's, felt the romance settle deep. Not fireworks, but hearthfire steady, warming the bones against coming winters. Unforgettable, Alex teased, lips brushing temple. Daniel laughed. Free. Every step. In Willow Creek, the church doors stayed open wider, rainbows subtle in stained glass repairs. Grace, turned out, wasn't a building or a book, but the quiet act of slipping off your shoes for another, and walking beside them, hand in hand, into whatever dawn broke next. The girl in old shoes had taught them that, and in her light, they all shone a little less alone.